Our next speaker, I just want to tell you a little story to kind of set the stage. So when I was going to grade school here in California back in the 1950s, okay, and yes, for the young people around here, we did have electricity back then. There was a young guy with Down syndrome in my neighborhood. And he did not go to school with us. More importantly, I never asked my parents, his name was Paul. I never asked my parents, why doesn't Paul go to school with us? Of course Paul did not go to school. He had Down syndrome. As we then said, he was retarded, we would say back then, right? And so kids like that didn't go to school. They stayed home. And that's what Paul did. My kids, and I have 3 adult kids, went to school with kids with Down syndrome and autism and Fragile X syndrome and cerebral palsy, kids who were deaf, kids who were blind, kids with severe behavior problems, you name it. And never once did my kids come to me and say, how come those kids get to go to school with us? That has been the true revolution in the United States that really began in the 1950s, and it was the Down Syndrome Parent Organization that really started making that change, that eventually in the mid-1970s led to federal law mandating that every child in the United States deserves a free and appropriate education. And that was at age 5 and above. Later, that was moved to infancy and above. So that's the kind of revolution now, and I've just spent 10 days in the Philippines, 10 days, right before that I was 10 days in Colombia, South America, and you're seeing those kinds of laws are now being implemented in those countries and many other countries. So with that said, I want to introduce our next speaker, Jessica, Jessica, I thought it, Tellez? How'd I do? And Jessica's going to talk about resources and the rights of parents with disabilities. She's going to talk about the organization that she is a part of. Because as I've said, in the United States and increasingly around the world, there are laws that mandate services for all kids with special needs. So Jessica, you will, come on up.
Tellez. I am an assistant client's right advocate with Disability Rights California. Disability Rights is one of the largest law firms in California that specifically targets and tries to help with legal and advocacy assistance for people with disabilities. But I work for a unit called Office of Clients' Right Advocacy. We have 21 offices all throughout California. Each office is contracted to work with regional centers. Regional centers are a resource for people with developmental disabilities, and what we do is we're contracted to help those consumers with legal services. Some of the services that we provide are going to IEP meetings for special education, attending IHSS evaluation, in-home supportive services. We do a lot of things like represent at hearings, provide technical assistance, and review evaluations. Sometimes a person wants to get a service from the regional center and they get denied. So we review evaluations, send them over to our experts, and then assist them with that hearing process for the consumer to become eligible. Other areas that we do are abuse, neglect, discrimination, employment law. I think I mentioned Social Security. We also try to help educate families with conservatorship. Sometimes families want to conserve a person with a disability because they think they don't have the ability to make legal decisions. And we try to help the family understand that maybe there are some decisions that this person can make for themselves, and maybe a conservatorship is not what should be in place. We do things like power of attorney, advanced healthcare directives, where a family member could make medical decisions on that person's behalf. Do I have any questions? No, my presentation is very small. I do have more information about the services at the table, And if, oh, yes.
Just asking about the power attorney for your children who have neurological disorders. So you're saying that's not recommended, or?
Well, it can be recommended on some cases. You know, we want a person with a disability to be able to make decisions on their behalf, but we understand that not every person has that capability. And so we try to advise parents of other alternatives or options. A power of attorney is a different option versus full conservatorship. You know, a person can make their own educational decisions, choose where they want to work, and then a power of attorney is making financial and medical decisions on that person's behalf. You're welcome.
Jessica, pronouncing the name?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
But would you a little bit give us more information about that? Are you specifically in charge of helping families with children with special needs?
We help children, adults, and seniors that are special needs.
So in that case, when a family has a child with autism or any other neurodevelopmental disorder, how the other siblings and parents are getting help from you?
Okay, so we just help regional center consumers. If a parent calls us and they want to get services from Alta California Regional Center and they're not consumers yet, they haven't been found eligible, we'll assess whether we can help them with the eligibility process and get their foot in the door, you know, through the intake process, or even recommend them to one of our psychologists or experts that can do an evaluation. Sometimes we get calls that are not legally related, like there's no relation to what we do, and we try to give families resources in the community. For example, housing is some issues that we get called for a lot, like Section 8, and that's not an area of law that we practice, but we know people out in the community that do take that kind of, will help in that area, and we make sure that when we send out a referral, they're in good hands. Yeah.
I might get more information later on because we provide information on our website, and then maybe later on I'll get more details.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
How to help other families.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for having me here today.